Hello and welcome to Big Picture. I am Vishal Dahiya and today we will talk about government's policy on attracting foreign direct investment. Now, foreign direct investment or FDI is a major driver of economic growth and is largely a matter of private business decisions. FDI inflows depend on a number of factors such as availability of natural resources, infrastructure, market size and general investment climate, etc., etc. Government of India has put in place a liberal and transparent policy for FDI, with most sectors open to FDI under the automatic route. To further attract more investors, the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, along with the Investment Promotion Agency, Invest India, have joined hands to put in place a new mechanism under which those looking to invest $500 million or more will have a designated person to facilitate all clearances. So how will this new policy help in attracting more FDI and what more needs to be done on this front? For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests in the studio. Let me first introduce the guests to you, beginning with Mr. Ajay, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, is with us. We also have Mr. S.K. Jindal, Chairman of Investment and Capital Markets in SOCHM, and we're joined by Professor Aman Agarwal, the Director of Indian Institute of Finance. Welcome all of you gentlemen to Rajya Sabha TV studios. Let me begin with you, Mr. Dua, and let's try and look at the policies first, vis-a-vis the FDI. Now, the Government of India's policies for attracting foreign direct investment, how do you look at them and what are the major contours?
I think the policy is very benign and as well as a dynamic one. So, the government has to be credited with keeping these two characteristics of the policy. The government has been from time to time relaxing the policy to make more items on the automatic list rather than on the restrictive list, and also the government has been, in fact, in certain items which are earlier prohibited altogether, reducing the prohibited list gradually, and now just a handful of products based on health grounds and security grounds only are not allowed to be. So the policy, I would say, is good, flexible, but I come to an issue which is related to the subject which you just introduced, that having a benign policy, flexible policy, adjusting to the times is a prerequisite. To actually get investment, you need far more factors to be in position. One, the regulatory framework, the policy has to be predictable. If you suddenly change a policy mid-course, we've seen in the case of FDI, particularly for instance, what's being alleged, that in the matters of a very recent example, e-commerce, that mid-course you change the policy when people had brought in money and they themselves protesting, I don't mind naming Amazon and the Walmarts of the world, and then their governments, and making that an issue as a trade issue is saying, why are you doing it when people have brought in money? So, a predictability of your regulatory framework is an extremely important factor.
Okay.
Second, what is required by an investor, and I've now talked from after, having been in the government for 30 odd years, I've in the last 10 years after retirement, I've been on the other side, seeing what exactly do the MNCs want, sitting on some boards, advisor, or chairman of a couple of these companies. So that's given me, one is predictability. Second, they all seek political and economic stability in the country. That is an equally important aspect for them to be able to look at that country for in terms of investment.
Okay.
Currency stability is an equally important issue. Because if we say that the rupee is becoming cheaper, so now they can bring in money, then they keep on waiting, saying today it is 70 rupees, tomorrow why not wait when it becomes 80? So, some point of time there has to be a realism coming in. That's very briefly, because I am sure this will come in later.
Okay.
We also need to be worried about the fact that they would bring the money in when they know the country has competitiveness in its product making. That's one. Otherwise, they can go somewhere else where the same product can be made cheaper, from where they can find markets. And, and finally, they also look at the aspect that is that the country where they are coming, is it growing or not? Because today, somehow the other needs are being met. If the country is growing, then the demand in that country becomes larger. If the faster the rate of growth of the country now or anticipated, the better it is for them to be able to come in.
Okay. Mr. Jindal, from industry's perspective, you know, the policies vis-a-vis FDI and, as Mr. Dua put it, seem to be very benign, and the regulatory framework as well, as Mr. Dua put in an important point out there. How do you look at all these aspects from the industry's perspective?
You see, as I look at, if I have to invest overseas, what I will be looking for there. So these people also are looking the same thing. They also have the same questions for that. And conditions in India, few of the things are very positive. Market size, for example, the demand here, etc., which they don't get it there. But at the same time, stability is missing. Changes take place so frequently that they get shaken up. Taxation issues also, at times, they get such a big shock that it sends a wrong message to the whole world.
Okay.
So similarly, it's a very good idea to focus on a special kind of treatment to those who want to spend up to a level. And even the Prime Minister mentioned in US, I remember, that I will bridge the gap if there is any gap in between. I'll ensure myself that you are helped and you have no issues on your investments in India.
Okay.
So he has gone to that extent also.
So this new policy of hand-holding the investor
is very important, very important, and I welcome it. And this will give more confidence and more comfort to the investing community. Once they come, they see, then it can send right messages to all over the world, and you can see multiplication of that. So it's a very good idea to do new things, out of the box thing, that they have created this new thing, which is the need of those people, that who will hear us, who will listen to us, there is somebody. So then it becomes easy for them to decide in favor of India.
Okay. Professor Agarwal?
You see, very important component, if you really look at what's been going on, we are receiving roughly about, according to RBI report about a week back, $17.7 billion as FDI and about $3.3 billion as portfolio investment, which has come in between April to June. If you look at the DIPP report, it says roughly about $21.3 billion has come in, which has grown by about 28% as to previous.
And that's quite a significant growth.
That's a quite significant growth. Apart from this, if you really look at the stability in foreign direct investment, we have been stable around $61 billion on an annual basis, which has increased multifold as against 2000, 2010, 2014, it has increased substantially, but it's stable and it's still growing. It was about 59, 60, then 61 and 62 last year. So it's been going up. This is at a point of a time when the IMF, the World Bank, comes out and says that the global GDP is expected to take a turnaround by 0.8%, or because of $700 billion of foreign direct trade being impacted because of the US sanctions and others. Now, at that point of time, if we are receiving large amount of foreign direct investment in this country, which is actually in the form of equity or reinvestments, which is going on, so there we are clearly visible to the fact that the environment is fairly positive. We are also looking at the fact that the government is trying to put forward, and rightly pointed out by Mr. Dua, there needs to be economic stability, political stability, which needs to be there, and we are seeing that political stability, this term being given to this government again, is there. In terms of even economic stability, when the rest of the world has having negative growth, we are looking at a growth factor of about anywhere between 5.5% to 6.2% declared by different agencies. So we are seeing that growth component come in. We are still growing at 5, and the World Bank, where I worked about 18 years back in DC, clearly points out to the fact that even today we are the fastest growing economy in the world.
Okay.
We have increased transparency, and the recent Nobel Prize which came forth, we saw what the Nobel Prize talks about in terms of eradicating poverty, we have come down from 15% from the world poverty clock to about 2.7% now. And that is tremendous increase. Brookings Institute quoted that about a year back at 5.1%. How is that happening? Because the different programs which the government of India has launched in the last 6 years are in consensus with what the Nobel Prize this time talks about. That is experimental approach at the ground level, uplifting the people. Now these are some things which are very critical. Uniformation, the GST framework, the other transparency structures which have been created by the government. These are some things which have been enjoyed by international agencies worldwide. Even recently in the RBI report, they said we are going to allow derivatives on the rupee currency, which is again an internationally accepted norm when a currency has been floating for such a long time. It's been floating since mid-1970s. Now that clearly shows the fact that there is more acceptability, more demand for India as a hub for bringing in investment. Current investment which you are seeing is largely coming into the services sector. And that is something which is also promising, because that is something which gives a direct boost to consumption growth in due course.
So there's a lot of promise as far as bringing in more FDI is concerned. Mr. Agawal, let me bring you on this related aspect, something which we started the show with, as in the new policy of trying to handhold the new investors who bring a certain amount of money as FDI, say around $500 million or more than that. Can that be rather seen as one more confidence building measures vis-a-vis the investors, when you are talking about what all needs to be done to ensure that the investor seems more confident to try and bring in more money here?
Certainly. I think it's a very positive step. And I comment in the context that there is still a general impression, that a global impression, that emerging markets, including in India, are mired in red tape, that it's very difficult to do business. We may have moved on from a 100th position to 77th, and in a couple of days' time probably move forward further when on the 24th the World Bank comes out with the current year's standing. But the fact of the matter is, all those, as I said, are enabling matters. And the ease of doing, index of ease of setting up business is not doing business. Ease of setting up business is based on just examples of 2 cities, certain parameters, certain industries, not globally. We still know that in India, at the cutting edge level, which is the state and the district level, a lot more needs to be done by the states. Center may have eased a few things, but a lot more. So this is going to give them confidence that here is a person who knows the things, who is going to be telling us that I can cut across this maze of red tape at different levels. So it will give confidence. But I would like to just say, to make 1 or 2 suggestions in this regard. One, I think $500 million is a very high threshold limit. I can commit, I'll bring $2 billion, but I don't start with that. I start with $100 million, $200 million. So am I going to be covered, or are you going to say, first commit $500 million to India, then only you get an escort from here? I would say the money comes in as confidence builds in. It is good to start at 50 million, which itself will add up. If 100 people bring 50 million, that becomes $5 billion. That's number 1 point. Second, in our scheme of things, only as long as you are, say, Invest India person. Invest India is a FICCI and a Government of India's joint proposition, but those people are private people. Not everybody is on board to whom they go. They say, why are you bringing this case of a private person? That's our first reaction. And coming from the government, I can tell you, having worked there, that's our first reaction. So I would like to see these Invest India personnel, because they have a government patronage, the government also vesting in them certain ranks, saying you are a Deputy Secretary to Government for FDI PR purpose. You have a card, you have a status, and then when you go with that case, you are not looked upon as saying somebody pushing a case of a private sector person, and then or saying you come again. Look here, I am also a government officer. I have been designated for this purpose. I may be sitting outside the DIPP, or I might even have a common room in the DIPP. When I say this, I'm quoting the example of Japan Plus, which Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe started in the very first year of their tenure, when his tenure started. Under Japan Plus, the agreement was that an officer of the Japan government will sit in the Prime Minister's office and an Indian officer would sit in the Prime Minister of Japan's office to help each other. All right, Prime Minister's office probably not. But then in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, DIPP, a Japanese person actually sat in the ministry. He was a Japanese national on behalf of METI, their investment promotion thing.
Okay.
And so every Japanese person, I'm saying it so emphatically, anybody who came after that would say, where is this gentleman? I can even take his name, Mr. Toifuku. Where is Toifuku? He is the one who knows how to break through the system of the government.
Okay,
and Toifuku comes with saying, I am a METI officer, Government of Japan officer, deputed. I sit in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. It added to his legitimacy.
Okay, so these are all part of confidence building measures with the investors, and that is really, really important. Mr. Jindal, from the industry's perspective, two things here. One is that this particular new proposal, it seems to go ahead and address the concerns on the very most difficult aspect, which is considered very difficult by most of the investors, is dealing with the state governments, dealing with local bodies. That is something which is taken care of here.
Yes, and I tell you that in overseas, for example, I tell you my own example. In Singapore, I was in a conference. The local people from the ministry, they were also in touch there, and they asked me, if you invest here, we are able to help you. Whatever you want, you tell us. And I said, what kind of help? He says, on anything. Income tax, you tell us what kind of income tax you would like to pay. We have about 16%, but if you want reduction, we can do it. You tell, suppose you want 11 or 12 or 13. We will make out a case. If it is agreed, we will agree to that. Who can talk about income tax reduction in India? Nobody. So that is the reason I would say that these kind of things, as Mr. Dua rightly said, we should not stick on 500 million or something. 50 million is a reasonable number. Let those people come and taste the place, because matching of strength is required. You see, they have certain strengths, we have certain strengths. If we match them, the result will be a powerful result, a good result for both of us. It will be a win-win. So that thing to happen, we have to open up. We have to show a ecosystem that welcomes them. And once they are here, like in Japanese, you have seen how successful these Japanese companies are in the whole of India. All of them are working very well. Because of this special arrangement, perhaps they got this confidence that our man will tell us what needs to be done, and we can believe him what he is saying. If an Indian is saying something to a Japanese, it is different ratio. If a Japanese himself is saying, like if we go overseas and an Indian is telling us that I hold this position and I am guiding you that this is the way forward, we will believe it.
Okay, you'll be more confident.
Yes.
Okay. Professor Agarwal, your viewpoint on all these suggestions, and maybe, this might make these policies more benign than they are right now?
No, I think India is doing this at a little late stage now, because for the last 20 years I have been traveling around over 60 countries and I have seen various governments have introduced these policies of one-stop shop for most investments.
But better late than never.
But let me tell you again, the Invest India about 5 years back actually started this movement even more aggressively, wherein they did give that one-stop shop. Here what they are now trying to do is, because you see recently the Prime Minister visited the US with the Houston visit and met large number of industries, large number of big group companies, and they invited them to come in. Now they may have put forward a framework where they wanted a little better preference than just an investor, and that's where this particular framework of 500 million is being created, so that there can be more facilitation for those. So it is not that it was not being done, it's just that an additional facility, an additional office is being created within that framework, which was a one-window shop.
More focus is being given to this aspect
on larger investments, so that we can have more investments come in. Because please understand that FDI typically means growth and development for a longer duration, because that is a direct investment which either goes in structures of manufacturing, in terms of creating facilities, whether retail outlets or defense or whatever you want to do. And we have opened up large number of sectors, except for 8 or 9 sectors which are very critical but small sectors. where we have not opened up, leaving that we have opened up in all sectors, including defense to a great extent, and even retail to that extent. So we have opened up in large sectors. So it's now a question of wanting this growth of agriculture, of people and investors coming and doing it. Now that's where we are giving a more hand holding, whether like the way Duaji suggested, we can do that way as well, which we traditionally tested. But even more than that, it is important to simplify, and I am fortunately happy to see that in the last couple of months, we are seeing the government trying to ease administrative reforms, the tax break structure which have been coming in, equalizing it to the level of Asian levels. It's a very good move because that makes it very comfortable and understanding for international agencies. What Mr. Singh talked about, it is, Mr. Jindal talked about, is there. In Switzerland does it, but not many countries have that flexibility in their taxation. But the fact that we reduce it to such a level clearly is a welcoming arm to the international community, which is already moving into the country. So we are expecting this to go even further and more stronger, trying to bring in development and growth in almost all sectors, whether it is education or healthcare, to be tuned with the Ayushman Bharat, whether it is looking at poverty eradication, whether you're looking at other facilities. I think this is something which is the right approach by creating these facility frameworks to get people in the right corners to do so. I have met so many industrialists at OECD meetings and ADB, and they see a lot of change happening in terms of investment, how they can repatriate. One of the worries which happens is, because in India is a multi-state country, it's a federal state, so there are different rules, and fortunately GST has helped reduce that, but still their rules are so complex that they find that they are able to do good business in one state but not in another. And that's what I think will get resolved to some extent by this particular window which is created.
Okay, so that disparity will get resolved out there as well. Let me ask one quick question each to you, Mr. Dua and Mr. Jindal. And Mr. Jindal first, the concluding comments is, from your perspective as a businessman, as from the industry, what is it that you would want the government to do more in terms of easing things, in terms of ensuring steps like these, and maybe something more as well?
They should not leave any stone unturned on this front to invite FDI, because without FDI, I don't see any big growth happening. It is the key for growth, and it is inevitable. You cannot skip it. You cannot leave it behind. So it is very important to do what they need, and in spirit, literally in spirit, so that it is not just showing it. I was really surprised with my Singapore example that these people were asking me what rate you want for income tax. We will work out something. So similarly, we should also be able to talk on those lines or similar lines, that we are able to make them comfortable. There are what we are discussing in the beginning is very little. What we can achieve is much more for both the things, both the nations, both the parties, and the beginning is important. If beginning happens, then rest will follow. Okay, so beginning is important, and then scaling up can happen for which is going to be beneficial for both the parties. That is obviously the investor and the country as well. Mr. Dua, what more can be done? Because you've been on both sides, as you said. You've been with the government for more than 3 decades, and you've been with the industry as well, trying to learn or see how things work there. So from your views, what is it that the government in its capacity can do to try and improve things further? Because all of us know there is always a scope for improvement when you talk about policies.
We may have done well in attracting FDI, but we have to go by the figures which are internationally put forward. UNCTAD, that's the agency which gives the net foreign inflow figures. For us, last year was $44 billion net, which is certainly an increase, but it shows also it's stagnated over the last year and a half. We have not seen much of an increase. So we at a time when there is less investment taking place, private sector in India is not being very forthcoming about investment for a variety of legitimate reasons. Attracting foreign investment has become imperative if we have to keep our pace of investment going. Number two, this is a time when people are looking at the higher cost of production in China, largely. One, because of the trade war, the market becomes restrictive. Second, the wages in China are on the increase. The one-child norm has come to kind of roost in a way. The wages have gone up. so people are trying to relocate.
And therein lies the opportunity.
And therein lies our opportunity. Let's not be losing out to Vietnams, Thailands, which have of the world, which may have comparative advantages similar to our labor intensive, but we are a much larger economy with reserve army of labor, unskilled, skilled, and there I would say, please, let's be competitive. This is a window for us. And when I say competitive, if Vietnam and Thailand have opened a special tax window saying we will be charging only 10% taxation on people relocating from China, only for China. In India, we try and do it. Why are you doing it for such and such industry?
But
why from here?
But some tweaks will have to be made.
No, we have to. We may have brought it down to 15%, but certainly, I think as a government, strong enough government, which can take calls saying, why do we let these guys go to the other places when we need them here?
Okay.
Well, number one. Second, ease of doing business is coming in business, bringing it. But what is also needed is ease of their doing business, not just coming in. Whole lot of things need to be attended to. And I would say, at a time when the domestic investor is not there, if we set out escorts not just for bringing in, but also say 2 years, 3 years, we will help you sort out your issues and ease of doing business, and special concessions if we have to give in terms of land costs, etc., well worth it.
Okay, so there it is.
And labor flexibility also, at least if you can't do it for everybody, these guys, all right, labor is flexible on the terms for at least initial 10 years.
Okay, okay. So these are some of the suggestions as our panelists, Mr. Dua and Mr. Jindal, as well as Professor Agarwal, have pointed out, India's policies for foreign direct investment are definitely benign, and we are trying to make further improvements to it to try and increase that confidence in the investor. But there are some scope for improvement further, and these suggestions coming in from these panelists we hope that will definitely be looked into by the government. We'll come back again tomorrow with a different topic, different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.